In this demo, I will be using ServiceNow as a self-service portal for storage as a service activities. I will be showing PowerStore integration. However, any of our storage platforms could be used. The demo will show the ability to create a volume, map that volume to a VMware environment, and then create a VMFS data store on top of it. The second part will show a volume being requested to attach directly to a VM as an RDM. This specific use case can provide a VMware user or an administrator portal to consume PowerStore storage. ServiceNow also has the ability to provide an approval process along with a cost management feature. This allows business units to be charged back for the services that they do use. Let's get started by showing you the Ansible playbook. Here's a repository that's synced up with AWX. And below you can see all the playbooks that AWX could consume. So anytime you wanted to consume a new playbook, you would upload it to the repository, and this repository gets synced up with AWX. Let's go to take a look at the playbook that we're going to be using. So under vars are the variables that are needed to run this playbook. We're going to need to know volume name, volume size, VMFS version, and the array name. These are going to be gathered through a ServiceNow catalog request. When the user executes a request, he's going to enter these values, and then these values will be sent over into this playbook. Let's take a look at the task. So the first task that's going to take place is to create the PowerStore volume. This is going to be done by using the PowerStore volume module. Once a volume is created, it's going to go ahead and register the WWN of that volume. The second task it's going to do the mapping. Again, this is done by the PowerStore volume module. Each of these modules can perform a variety of tasks, and it all depends on the values that are provided. We're then going to rescan all the EXI host adapters, and this is done by using a VMware Ansible module. After the adapters are scanned, we're going to go ahead and create a VMFS data store off that volume. Once that volume is created, we're going to do a rescan on all the EXX hosts that are part of that virtual center. Now let's go take a look at AWX. Let's log in. So under projects is where you would register your GitHub repository. Here's the repository that we're going to be using. And you can see this is the URL to the repository. You would just provide the credentials to the repository and then sync it. Let's take a look at the job template we're going to use. In order to create a job template, you're going to specify a name, you'll specify a short description, and you're going to specify a job type. Under project, you're going to specify the repository that you want to work with. And when you select that repository, all the playbooks that are associated with that repository are going to be available to select. Under credentials, you have the ability to select a pre-configured credential to pass into the playbook. In this example, I'm going to be using the VC demo credentials. These credentials have the username and password for the virtual center environment. Once a job template is created, there's a unique ID that's assigned to it. If you look above in the address bar, you can see the number 16. And here is the full URL to the endpoint that can be used to launch the job. So we're going to provide this endpoint into ServiceNow. ServiceNow will send a REST request and pass over the variables needed to actually launch the job. Now let's go take a look at the ServiceNow request. Let's take a look at the REST request that will launch the job. You can see under endpoint is the same URL that I just showed you earlier. We'll be using a basic authentication type and supplying a username and password to authenticate against the AWX server. Under HTTP methods is where we would create the variables needed to pass into the playbook. Here are the variables that we're going to be gathering and sending over with the REST request. We're going to gather the VMFS version, the volume size, the volume name, and the array that we're going to use. So these values will be populated when the user executes the service catalog request. Now let's go take a look at the workflow. Workflows contain the logic of a catalog request. In this instance, when a catalog request is submitted, it's going to go over to an approver. This approver in our demo is going to be the storage administrator. At that time, the storage administrator would look at the request to see if there was enough resources on the storage array, and he can either approve or reject the request. If he approves the request, it's going to go ahead and execute a script, which is going to run the REST call I just showed you, and then it's going to complete and then end the job. He can also reject the request, which would go back and end the job and notify the user that his request was denied. You also have the ability to add multiple approvers. For instance, if there was a cost to the service that was being requested, it can go to a manager. If the manager approves it, it can then go to the storage administrator. You also have the ability to call multiple scripts. If there's another process that you would like to run or an additional API call, you can add that as part of the workflow. Let's take a look at the catalog request. And below you're going to see all the items that are available under this catalog. Let's go ahead and execute the Datastore request. Here we're going to ask for the PowerStore volume name. This name is also going to be used to name the Datastore. Below we're going to be able to select the array to use. We can either choose a PowerStore T1000 or a PowerStore T9000. Here are the three sizes of volumes that can be created. It's 100 gigabyte, 200 gigabytes, and 500 gigabytes. So by using predetermined values, ServiceNow can give you guardrails on what can and cannot be requested. You also have the ability to select a specific PowerStore array. Select the VMFS version you would like to use. Give a name for the volume. And execute the order. At this point, the storage administrator would receive an alert that he has an approval waiting. He would then log into ServiceNow to either approve or reject that request. Let's look at that approval. Under details, we can see the volume name. We can see the PowerStore array that was requested, and we can see the volume size. The storage administrator would determine if there's enough capacity on the array and either approve or reject the request. Let's go ahead and approve the request. So at this point, the REST message is getting sent over to AWX. Let's go take a look at AWX. Let's go to jobs. And we can see the job is currently running. The playbook is getting executed with the variables that were supplied in the catalog request. If we go over to details, so below we can see the variables that were sent over from ServiceNow. We have the volume name, we have the volume size, we have the VMFS version, and we have the array name. Let's go take a look on the PowerStore array. Let's log in. Let's go over to storage and let's look at the volumes. We can see the volume that we created with the size of 100 gigabytes. Let's go over to the virtual center. Let's go into the data stores. And we can see below that the volume has been attached and a VMFS version 6 has been applied. The next request is going to be to attach an RDM to a VM. Here's the VM we're going to use. If we go to settings, we can see currently it only has one hard disk, which is 40 gigabytes. Let's go back into ServiceNow. Let's go back into the catalog. And we're going to select the request PowerStore RDM volume. Here the user is going to be required to enter the exact name of the VM. In this case, we're going to be using the demo VM. They're also going to be required to enter a volume name. This is the volume name that's going to be created on the PowerStore. Next, they're going to select the size of the volume they want to create. Let's go ahead and select 150. And also in this catalog request, they have the ability between two different storage arrays. Let's go ahead and place the order. Let's go back to the approval process. Under details, we can say volume of 150 gigabytes was requested. It was requested against the PowerStore 1000, and it's going to be assigned to a VM called Demo VM. Let's go ahead and approve it. And let's go take a look at the job. Here's the job being run. You can see the playbook's being executed. And if we go over details, we can see the variables were passed over correctly. Let's take a look at the storage array. Let's do a refresh. And we can see the volume here. I did create logic and within the Ansible playbook to append an RDM to the name. This way the storage administrator can know what that volume is being used for. Let's take a look at the virtual center. Let's go take a look at the VM again. And we can see the 150 gigabyte volume has been attached. So the normal process would be for an end user to open a request and provide all the details. The storage admin would then do the provisioning according to the details of the request and then go back and notify the end user. The end user would go ahead and scan for the volume and then create the file system on top of it. If there are details that were missing from the original request, the storage admin would need to reach back out to the end user for any clarification. So there's a lot of back and forth that can take place. By using infrastructure as code, automation, along with the self-service portal, you can speed up the time it takes to complete these types of requests. This concludes the demo. Thank you for your time.